I'm Danny Fortson, the West Coast correspondent for the Sunday Times.
Can you take us back, Danny, to an event a few weeks ago now? It was in Nashville, Tennessee, and there was a large crowd cheering quite an unlikely guest at a Bitcoin conference.
That's right. Donald Trump, of all people, he showed up. He was the keynote speaker, and he made all kinds of promises about what he was going to do for the crypto industry, for Bitcoin in particular, which is really surprising because up until quite recently, he seemed to be very much against all things crypto and a big skeptic.
Very pro money, we know that. Why not crypto money?
Exactly right. Exactly right. I mean, I think, his presence there was both surprising and totally unsurprising. Because if we have seen anything from Donald Trump over this last decade or so, is that he is very transactional. And what's really interesting about crypto, along with, tech, is that it has grown up. There's a lot more money around. And in this election cycle, the crypto industry, there's a recent report that put out that they've already invested about $120 million into this election cycle, which makes the crypto industry, these are the big companies, the big investors, one of the largest kind of groups of corporate donors in this election cycle. That gives you a sense of why all of a sudden he might be very interested in cozying up to them.
And not just cozying up to them, his presidential campaign has actually been flogging crypto items, hasn't it? They've been selling digital trading cards with his image on. Is that right?
Mm, that is right. They're $100 each. And if you get four of them, you also, I think, you get a free pair of golden shoes that are also Trump shoes. So it feels like quite a good deal. I mean, it's another way to make money, right? And he's leaning into that, and it appears that people are actually are investing, and it's another new business line for the former president.
So that endorsement from him for crypto, and I guess in some parts crypto for him, happened. But thinking about Silicon Valley a bit more broadly, in the sort of recent past, how would you characterize Silicon Valley's politics, if we can generalize it?
Wildly progressive. So if you just step back and look at where we are in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco, kind of San Francisco Bay, which is where a lot of these big tech companies are based, it is long been seen as kind of this bastion of progressive politics, of progressive policies. And that is really reflected in the workforces of the big tech companies. So if you look at the kind of the voting, there's been a lot of research into kind of the voting tendencies of the rank and file, so to speak, of little tech and big tech, and it is pretty dramatically skewed toward Democrat, toward the left. And that is the way it has been in recent years and really going back decades.
And there was a time, wasn't there, where the sort of higher echelons of these bigger companies were quite cozy with, especially thinking of like President Obama's administration. I mean, even sort of a load of Obama staffers went to go and work there afterwards, didn't they?
Yeah, there's a bit of a revolving door. So it's really interesting. You look at the higher echelons of places like Meta, formerly known as Facebook, Google, Uber, a lot of the kind of the top policy people, the top comms people, you look at their resumes, and their previous stop was the White House, or, in the House of, the Speaker's office, or various places pretty high up in the Washington kind of political machine.
So, what did they make of Donald Trump then when he arrived firmly on the political scene in the build up to the 2016 presidential election?
Yeah, so when he arrived, like a lot of places, or a lot of places that are heavily Democrat, it was kind of a mix of horror and awe that this figure had appeared, and he seemed to be doing quite well. But one thing is very clear is that, if you were a supporter of Donald Trump in Silicon Valley, in the tech industry, you didn't talk about it because it was a really kind of almost like a scarlet letter that you would have to wear if you were going to kind of came out and said, I support Donald Trump. Here is why I think he's great, etc. So it was a real, you would be very much seen as an outsider and something, someone not to be kind of disinvited from the dinner party if you were a techie who supported Trump.
And so in 2016, he famously won, of course, and in 2020, he famously lost. And in the new year of 2021, in the build-up to President Biden's inauguration, of course, we had the now infamous Capitol storming and riots. A lot of tech companies at the time, they rushed to distance themselves from him. Is that fair to say at that time?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, not just tech companies, virtually every company. I mean, there was that period right after that terrible event where, everyone under the sun, including, the entire Republican establishment effectively disowned Trump and his role in that whole affair.
And he was chucked off some of the social media platforms.
Indeed, that's right. Off of Facebook, off of Twitter. And that was a really big moment. And that, in a way, if you look back at it now, where things are now in 2024, that was kind of a pivotal moment, because that was these companies that, especially on the conservative side of the political aisle, they see them as these left-wing progressive companies who are pushing their agenda, who are silencing conservative voices. And here you have, Donald Trump, who had, I think at the time, something like 90 million Twitter followers, millions and millions of followers on Facebook, being kicked off. And they took that up almost as a cause célèbre of, look at these companies, they're out of control. They have become, they're being run, being directed by ideology, and it is a dangerous ideology. It is anti-free speech, it's anti-freedom. We need to support our guy, Donald Trump.
I'm Manveen Rana from The Story, a daily news podcast from The Times. Join me and my co-host Luke Jones for a deep dive into the big stories and investigations. Plus, each month, William Hague hosts an agenda-setting interview with a key newsmaker or big thinker. That's The Story, The Times daily podcast that brings you one remarkable story told in depth. Listen every weekday on the Times radio app or wherever you get your podcasts.